Did you know that in M21 there was a card called 9 Lives that shows a cat, and in the air behind him, he's proudly displaying his past 8 lives? These are all references to legendary cat creatures in Magic the Gathering history, namely Jizal Goldmane, Marisi Breaker of the Coil, Wasitora Nekoru Queen, Jedit Ojanen of Afrava, Kahira the Orphan Guard, Arbor Roar of the World, Miri Weatherlight Duelist, and Kemba Ka Regent. Just look at how proud he is. Merch, like, comment, subscribe. Hello, welcome back to Basics episode number 18, a show where I take EDH commanders and try to find the perfect basic lands to fit them. I love seeing someone sit down with some beautiful basic lands, but something I love even more is seeing how well those lands match their commanders. One quick note before we begin. I like to give the artists credit for their artworks, but I may not pronounce the names perfectly. I'll try my best, but please forgive me and correct me if that ever happens. Starting things off, we've got Darien, King of Kjeldor from Cold Snap. I love this artwork because of its intensity. The stern look on Darien's face, while coupled with the bleached, blanched atmosphere of the scene, makes the colors in it recede into the high contrast background. Also, the scene has him enclosed in stone, so the themes of nature are not present in this artwork, which helps narrow down the choices of basic lands by a lot. So, I have 5 different suggestions for you to look at that I think would match well with his aesthetic. Starting with this Plains from Ravnica's City of Guilds, illustrated by Stepan Martinier, that emphasizes the bleached, structured background of Darien. Or this Plains from Time Spiral, illustrated by Richard Wright, that has that very dark, bleak background accented by hints of the yellow that are in the gold gilding Darien's horse and his armor. Or this Plains from Ixalan, illustrated by Christine Choi, that emphasizes that deep gray hue and showing off an isolated stoic castle that I feel like matches his lore and his aesthetic. But I also think that this might be a good time to show off this awesome Plains from Zendikar, illustrated by Young Park, that I think does the same as the last one, but is also full art. Or finally, check out this Plains here from Jumpstart that I think matches his gameplay style of summoning tons of soldiers after taking damage, that I think that most Darien players would want to display in game. Overall, the choice is yours, but I personally prefer the Plains from Zendikar because full art lands usually get a lot more room to show their artwork off. Second on the list, we've got Araumi of the Dead Tide from Commander Legends. The thing I noticed first was how much energy the blue-green wave gives off that Araumi is riding. It actually reminds me of this artwork from Living Tsunami from Zendikar, illustrated by Matt Cavada, but when I saw that, I wanted to capture the wave that was central to Araumi's artwork. And that wasn't difficult to do with the islands, but it was a little bit harder to find swamps that conveyed that sense of heavy motion. So I had to use compositional elements to imply that motion indirectly. So take a look at this island from 10th edition, illustrated by Donato Giancala, depicting a thunderstorm at sea, and this swamp from Theros Beyond Death that matches the blues, greens, and slanted elements of Araumi's artwork, while also depicting the underworld that matches Araumi's reanimating playstyle. For a second pairing, I wanted to lean more down color matching, while also showing off some cool full art lands. So take a look at this island, illustrated by Tianhua X from Battle for Zendikar, and this gorgeous Tyrese Nielsen swamp from the 2014 Judge promos. I feel like these communicate the blues, blacks, and high motion emphasis that Araumi focuses on, which I think is really cool. Third on the list today, we've got Grismold the Dreadsower from Commander 2019. Grismold's color is very light and pastel, with the brightness of the foliage growing off and around him standing in direct contrast to his grim and intense appearance. Also, the background of the scene is very directly blue, even though there is no blue in his color identity. So we had to find lands that match that as well. So take a look at these 3 basic land pairs that focused on all of those elements. This forest from Commander 2018, illustrated by Min Yum, that has pastel coloring with notes of the blue and the purple, and this swamp illustrated by Jim Pavlek from Commander Anthology Volume 2. The higher saturation reprint of the version printed in M10 that focuses more on the blue. I liked how this pairing really shows off that blue hue, while also focusing on the pastel elements of the color palette, ultimately making him stand out among his Golgari peers. Secondly, check out this pairing that focuses more on the complexity of his imagery, starting with this swamp from Lorwyn, illustrated by Ron Spears, and this forest from Modern Horizons 2, illustrated by John Avon. Both of these have a lot of silhouetted elements and foliage that make the scene feel very cluttered and overgrown, which in Grismold's case is a plus. And for this third pairing, I wanted to show off a combination of both form and function of Grismold, starting with this forest from Jumpstart, illustrated by Adam Paquette, that shows a deer about to be eaten by a Venus flytrap, which I think matches his playstyle of gaining value through creature tokens dying. And this gorgeous swamp, illustrated by Alex Horley Orlandelli, that has the skeleton of a creature in the foreground, while also showing that bright pastel colors that Grismold shows in his art. I feel like this pairing really emphasizes how you would play a Grismold deck, summoning tokens to then destroy for his effect. And fourth on the list, we've got Skithryx, the Blight Dragon, a mono-black infect commander. Skithryx's focal points are twofold. First, the moonlight being filtered through the clouds to silhouette his form and separate him from the background, along with the green energy radiating like steam from his back. Ultimately, these features, along with his infect playstyle, really narrowed me down to just a few basics, and all of them focusing on Mirrodin. So I'd recommend this swamp illustrated by Martina Pilcherova from Mirrodin that shows the green energy that Skithryx shows in his artwork, and matches almost perfectly. In addition, if you wanted to run a panoramic of lands, you could run this awesome series of 4, all illustrated by Lars Grant West from Scars of Mirrodin here, which give a great depiction of the Necrogen pools that Skithryx comes from. Or, if you had a higher budget, you could run these swamps from the Magic Premier Shop promos, illustrated by John Avon and available only in Japanese. Ultimately, Skithryx is a character whose visual aesthetic writes itself, and it has been very well represented in MTG artworks, and any of these will stand out when played in multiples. Finally, to round it out, we've got a fun one. It's Toshiro Umezawa from Betrayers of Kamigawa. This commander is a mono-black commander, but when separated from his card frame, he looks very Rakdos in his color styling, with a horde of slain enemies, that deep fiery red sunset in the background, and even fire coming from his sword as an accent point. But considering that he is not a red and black colored commander, the goal became to mimic those styles in accurate ways without feeling too Rakdos. But I think I figured it out, starting with this high-budget swamp from the Asian Pacific Land Program, illustrated by Ron Spears, which has a series of gravestones, Asian-inspired text, and bright red spirits accenting the artwork. Or take a look at this swamp illustrated by Bob Ross from the Bob Ross Secret Lair, that has the bright red-orange sunset mimicked from image to image, which I think works spectacularly as well. However, because these two cards are relatively expensive, I did want to offer other suggestions if you were trying to find matching basics within a budget. So, take a look at this swamp illustrated by Mike Birek from M13, that has the bright red scenery, or this swamp from Mirage, illustrated by Bob Eggleton, while also showing off that setting sun that is present in Toshiro's artwork. Now, for those that got that beautiful Secret Lair Toshiro, there would need to be an entirely different choice for basics. Unfortunately, there were no basic lands in the game that can fully match this ink-brushed style with pink watercolor accents, so I had to try my best to find a land that could come as close as possible without treading on it stylistically. And I came across this Kamigawa Neon Dynasty swamp illustrated by AOG Maiko that definitely is artistically inspired by the same things that inspired this initial artwork. But there you have it. 5 more commanders, sorted for which basic lands I think match them best. But I want to see what you think. Tell me which commanders you'd like me to try and pick up basic lands for. Comment below and let me know, and have a great day.